Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Okay. The title of tonight's episode is The Attention That Held a Lantern in the Sky. And it's inspired out of this ancient idea that in ancient times, they would pretty much, not ancient times, but like, ancient to us, they would see that before having a scientific cosmological explanation, uh, astronomical explanation about the sun, people saw it back in the day and interpreted in their minds differently. Science is really a lens of interpretation. And we, in some sense, now know that it's in the sun, but back in the day, it was like this kind of uh, source. It's as if they felt that somebody was holding a lantern in the sky. And so I like sentences that have double meanings because the title, The Attention That Held a Lantern in the Sky, you can technically think about it, it's as if the sun, the lantern in the sky is the sun, or imagine somebody just actually holding a lantern in the sky, and that lantern mimics for them a micro sun, you know? Just a second, folks, just adjusting something. There we go. Okay. All right, let's properly get into the episode. The attention that held a lantern in the sky, you know, pretty much the relationship of man with light and the relationship of how what is found in the light is the space that man has to work with to some degree. Now, there has been times in my personal life where I've sat down and I've closed my eyes and I've kind of wondered, okay, what is this? You know, what would life be if my eyes had opened first as just how can I tell you, no visual sight. And then I realized is that there's always a presence of acknowledgement. It's as if like the way a person knows they are a person is because they are awake to their self, and then they externalize, and if their externality gets broken, they're still awake to self, you know? On some level, from the mystical angle, we can't tell if it's the person moving or if it's the whole cosmos moving. And that has been a fascination for any philosopher that opens up to the relationships of the micro and the macro. The mind, let us say, has an objective component and a subjective component, an objective realm and a subjective realm. And the precondition for the subjective realm is the objective realm, and the precondition for the objective realm is light. And the precondition for light is a space for there to be light. Do you know? So, in some sense, the precondition to all form is space. And I feel anytime a person is aware of themselves as space, that in some sense is uh, the epitome of perception as the witness. You know, there was something that's slightly chaotic. I don't know how many people notice it, but it was slightly chaotic in the sense that mysticism was getting rid of the problem, in the sense that the person went searching for truth, and the seeker transformed before they got what they wanted, and it was the transformation of the inner realm that changed the value of the outer realm. That means I can't tell you how many nights there have been I've sat down, I've listened to a lecture, from someone, and like a Terence McKenna lecture, Alan Watt lecture, and suddenly it was as if like those were people kind of telling you more about what's actually going on, you know? You see, we're not just purely material creatures to only design a system that satisfies material expectations. It's as if it's like, yes, on some range of our life is visible. Now, there are many things that move beyond the frequency of our perception. Dogs see things in black and white, you know. Snakes see in infrared, and so on. And so there's various creatures that have different access points to the one earth that is in some sense a precondition to their physicality. It's very hard kind of for the person to to be made from the earth, made from particles, and not to consider that they are the earth. The fact that we have only done that is through a subjective separation, a subjective simulation. We have pretty much blindfolded ourselves to the connectivity of all phenomena by feeling we are one separate thing, by utilizing duality. So it's kind of like man used fire and he made, powerful technologies out of it. And it's like the same with language, or let me say it like this, it's like man found dualism and made language. You see, there's always a space between the words, there's always a space between the branches of nature or academia. And space is one of the most crucial things that I think anybody in a creative field needs to become acquainted with. There's a creativity that is in an empty whiteboard, okay? And then there's a creativity that is not on an empty whiteboard. It's already stuff is written on it. So many children who have unique DNAs, who are a unique being, and they wake up to this life. They wake up in this life and they find themselves on a whiteboard or some sort of blackboard where there is answers already written. And sometimes, yes, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but sometimes we have to if we have forgotten how, and the answers are not even getting us there. Many things are prone to reinvention. Pretty much the person even reinvents themselves. It's kind of fascinating when you think about Edison, Tesla, these inventors, and how their inventions came about. It was as if behind their eyes they were fascinated with another potential of the world that was not accessible. Do you know? It's like I find the inner realms of many inventors on this planet has been way more sophisticated than their inventions. Their inventions were one phenomena of their inner realms that they could project or they could invent. For example, Nikola Tesla, this dude, um, who's pretty much he created the AC motor that is used everywhere, and so it was his effort was like he was what do you call it? Um, he was sitting on a bench in the park And then the vision of the AC motor came to him, and he picked up a stick and drew it on the dirt. And there's something fascinating. There's something fascinating about a human being where there is no explanation why that person should be inventing. You know, if you see it beyond, if you see the cultural dimension as hollow, you kind of see why in nature should a creature be, where in nature, by just examining nature alone, do we suddenly see that it's like it is a natural pattern for a creature to invent. You see, we are either ahead of the game, or we are of a totally different player in this game of species on this earth, on the surface of this earth. There's so many species. Go look at other animals, and when you look at them, you see there is a life there. When you look at a living being, you know, there is something precious that is like an allowance for that creature to exist in the moment. And can you just imagine how many people on this earth, their inner realms have become turbulent, and rather piloting their inner realms towards stability, you know, they externalize it. It's like sometimes when a person has a bad day, it's better for that person to go home early, you know? In other words, there's disharmony in the moment. Our attention is where the game is accessed, the game of reality. And attention, pretty much, you can't, like, a bunch of things a person can do with their attention is either it goes towards stillness and silence, like you don't move that much, your attention is actually in the observer mode. And then there is the attention which can be actually become the object and become the subject, you know and for me, I thought about it. If a person doesn't have that movement in their subjective realm and their body moves, it'd be kind of like a living zombie, no? So our inner realms are very crucial in society. It's not just about, for example, costume games and a physical persona. It is also what your body holds. You look at a battery, you see that there's a sort of energetic utility. There's a sort of potential for expression. And if you think of human beings, every day they wake up, they're like a charged, a kind of full battery again. It's as if, where is that energy and expression going to? And really, I think it's about wondering about who is watching the moment. So, it's as if I have noticed that when I am alone, I am I am working with certain subtle freedoms. Or when I'm under the shower, I can totally, feel. A singer. So when we are only being watched by ourselves, I think people actually don't judge themselves. And when they judge themselves, it's unnatural. It's like, imagine humanity created a robot, and this robot was made to judge itself. And so literally it couldn't complete a task because it was so busy calculating how to judge itself. I feel it has to do with every person feeling the world is, if the world is intelligent, then participation is possible, you know. I don't know what to say. It's something I've caught on to recently ideologically, where it's just this. Even before giving this talk, when I was having dinner, I was just thinking. I was thinking, how would one explain it? And in the simplest way I can say, it's like a person has this threshold of wanting to be watched, and I thought it's like as if the person is in their inner realms, and communication allows what is just real in one room to be real in multiple rooms. So I was thinking, why is there this effort in the human being to share its inner realms? you know and it can't just be survival, because you see, survival makes sense if we are not conscious of ourselves. That means we can just take nature's view, but we have deviated from nature in a way where I remember it was a surreal moment. I'm in the subway looking out the window, then I look in front of me, and I just see people, and I it's very hard to find a smile in the subway unless the person's, you know uh, I don't know, under the influence or laughing or something at a joke. But it's like, you see, it's like a natural smile is not hard to find because there's a workload to the day. Now, check this out. I was looking from the window right into the subway booth, and when I looked into the subway booth, I was like, "Whoa! Is an evolutionary biologist sitting down here and saying, all right, our ancestors were chimpanzees and some unknown being, you know, some unknown ancestor, and so we have become apes, chimp. We are like advanced chimps, chimp descendants. I don't know how to say, and the whole it's like we've renamed ourselves, we've redressed ourselves, we've realigned the way we walk as creatures, you know I mean, birds don't count, I think, but as four-limbed beings that walk on only two legs, it's like, you tell me, how much more, I think, terrifying it would be. Maybe not terrifying, but like stranger it would be if you imagine you've gone on a safari and you see all the lions are running on two legs towards. We became conscious. Something made nature rebel against itself to become something else. And that's the crucial thing I think many scholars in history have been trying to figure out. What led us here? Or what is this? You know? And it doesn't mean that question has an answer, and it also doesn't mean life is meaningless, because sometimes the meaning is living for the potential of the answer. Some things we don't have technologies to prove now, but it doesn't mean they're false. It just means we can't be certain. So where does that leave us? To kind of moving with percentages of known and unknown, you know? So that means there's some people who look at the day and they think they know everything. And there's some people who look at the day and they're like, how can I know everything? It's too big. And so it kind of becomes a situation where you are identifying either with the known and the unknown. And there is this building up of performance. It's as if the mind is writing a script as the person behaves, but it's an instantaneous movement of the inner realm and the outer realm. I sat down and I was sitting very still and just very quiet, just sitting. There's no greater meditation, guys, than just sitting. If I was to explain right now what I feel is happening right now in this moment in regards to my own communication with my subjective realms, you see, it's as if it's starting from levels of unconscious comfort, then coming to levels of interpretations of conscious comfort and discomfort. And really, when a person ends up being in a moment where the forces overpower the force of their free will, the free will still hangs on to the moment, but doesn't become the mover. So in life, the application of consciousness was that it's kind of like, as you are fully aware of not just the mechanics but the movements of the motorcycle, and it becomes as if when you're on the motorcycle, it's as if the whole motorcycle is your body. Or even when you drive a car, it's like after a while of driving a car, you have like this intuition of where the edges of it is. When you go to third world countries and you see taxi drivers, they drive what you may say a bit savagely, but they have such precision. They don't even make a mistake. It's as if they know it. They know what their car can pass, even like if it's centimeters away from impact. And so the thing is that it's pretty much we are a candle, the conscious waking state, the biological body is like a candle, and the light is the projection. And we can say candles are the oldest projectors. Maybe even before that consciousness, but anyways. So in the present moment, something is lit. And if you look at a candle flame, it doesn't per se have a linear order that you can measure, And so I find our attention, it's stabilization is a choice, linearity is a choice. It has access to what is there before chaos and order are interpreted, which is just a happening, a sort of movement. And just like you read a book, it's like as I'm speaking now, there is like the space between the sentences and then the next word, the space between the sentences and the next word. So it's kind of like, I think the way I'm speaking is like with an awareness to space, which is the observer of the movement, and with a sort of the mover, which is what is in the movement, or what is in the moment. The cool thing about the works of Carl Jung was that he restored the unknown. Friedrich Nietzsche declared God is dead and man killed him, and Carl Jung realized man had not yet killed the unknown. You know when the unknown we can say is killed is when a loop, when our civilization is literally lost in a loop program. What that means is it doesn't care about what could be beyond that which is simulated. And that's the whole, you can say, mystical calling. When you begin noticing subtle things about your moment, when you begin to see how there's a spontaneity to thought, and as action is done, it is simultaneously witnessed. So it's kind of like the mind body dualism of Rene Descartes to a level where you are the space where your life is happening simultaneously. So it's as if we can say poetically, the soul is moving matter through the space. Space is the string, and matter is the puppet, and what is moving the whole thing is the puppeteer, is an attributeless field. That means something that knowledge can never attain, the instantaneous dimension. where the singular is reverse engineered back into the void, and the person's like, wow, my whole lifetime that was influenced by me being a sense of self. When I look at where that sense of self came from, it came from an empty page where suddenly actions began occurring. So technically, regardless of who you are as a human being and what conditioning you've gone through, if you sit down and actually realistically wonder what your own conditioning means to you, you'll notice a sort of regression back into the earliest memory. And so I regressed back into, like, pretty much deep questions make you uh, look everywhere. And so it was as if a certain depth of questioning of the external realm was like a mirror. It's like opening Pandora's box and then seeing there's a paradox, and still, it's like you still can't see the truth. It's I found it very cool because in ancient cultures, certain gods, certain demigods had multiple faces. And you'll be like, why does the god need multiple faces? Doesn't it have one face that could do all expression? But the multiple faces were referral to not selves, but worlds that that being could externalize from, inner realms that the being could externalize from. It's I think the greatest thing that could help advance our civilization is a newfound wonder to study imagination again, to study abstraction, to study evocation, to recognize that kind of like, isn't the act of living, if especially work, a kind of ritualistic, ceremonial, you know, be exactly at And really, I've asked myself, is consciousness aware of itself only through patterns? Is life, is it like you can say any story a person, like right now, if somebody asks you who you are and you see yourself as a character in a story, okay? It's like born here, named this, did that, came here, so there's a story. Right now, in order for us to be individuals, in order to have a personality, you require to be a character in a story. But the issue is that the child is not born with full consciousness of the objective realm. So when you are still high, when you fear anything, you instantly go out of range of accessing the truth of that dimension. This is why people who are afraid should not make decisions that influence many. Fear, this doesn't mean you shouldn't fear and kind of be like a fearless robot your whole life. It means uh, we decide through our eyes first. That means we see first. There's a response in the inner realms, then there's the externalization. The whole issue of people reacting to phenomenology, to stuff happening, is simply because you can say like their inner, it's like they don't let that what happened externally sink in. And because they how can I tell you, sometimes thinking is such a ridiculous blindfold, it's hilarious. And so I think really at the end of it all intelligence is coming to movement, and all movement is being directed, and what is directing it is a mind, and that mind is the whole moment, and that whole moment is the field. That means that's why I call it a field, because it's something where all objective phenomenology are present in. You know, if we look at our language, it is all inspired out of the relationship of a creature separate to its world. Because if the creature was everything, then what would there be? Do you see? Language would not exist if we were not separate from the earth. It wouldn't even be necessary. There is this talk of silent languages, and it's another way of saying how meaning is not archetypal at its core. That means if in the conscious mind it appears that you're a person, in your unconscious there's no guarantee that it's going to be just as relevant to personhood. And sometimes the person has to ask, because you see, I'm suggesting our inner realms, it's a realm. It's a location that is not physically tangible, but it has design. Your imagination, it exists in design, but it doesn't exist like if I imagine a bottle of iced tea, it's not going to just appear in my hand, you know. So but the design of the iced tea is right there. I'm even able to communicate it, right? So it is fascinating that if we look at the brain, we in some sense say that, okay, even though we have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, it's still one brain. Okay, now check this out. If you saw all the words in the dictionary as different parts of one organism, if you saw all the words in the dictionary, their value to be just now, the great now. When one comes to the great now, it is literally like a temple where you have to take your shoes off, and that's a metaphor for taking your ideology off. You know, your ego is a hat you're wearing. Trust me, you can take it off in an instant. You can suddenly be silent in a moment. You know, it's like I remember me and my friends were speaking with a bit of a, this was in my youth, maybe I was like 17 at this age, and we were speaking in public in like about vulgar stuff, you know. And suddenly this woman, this kind of woman, this was in Iran, and she had a sort of, what do you call it, she had hijab on, and she was whacking, she was passing by, and as she was passing by, suddenly all three of us became like the perfect image of the perfect. Like we suddenly, it was as if like the volume knob was turned down, but the ideology was still alive in our minds. And then we were very nice, and we kind of said hi and, you know, good evening to the lady, and then she passed by, and then we you know, we as a group kept talking. So that's the thing. That's the thing. It was as if for a second we took off the image of who we were in one conversation, to have a person pass by and then we continue that conversation. It was like I took the hat off when the lady passed, put the hat back on, and we were in the same room of dialogue. So for me, my knowledge, if somebody asked me how would you teach communication to someone, I would say first thing you got to realize is that communication, or the realities required for communication, are happening in multiple rooms. So when I see a person, like, unless the person, I feel the person sees me, whatever the person says doesn't upset me. Unless I feel that person uh, has really seen me, seen, like you can sometimes really see people. Do you know what I mean by that? That means it's not just you can, and let me tell you how. It's by looking at their eyes, and simply looking at how the thoughts or their communication, what sequence of concepts are arising. And I can totally tell when a person's attention is just in their inner realms or in their outer realms. When you don't care for someone, let's say you're talking to someone, person A is talking to person B, person A, halfway in the middle of the conversation, doesn't care about what person B says. So when person A doesn't care about person B, what happens? Person A values their own inner realms superior to the other. So this is why doing kindness in public isn't cool. Because it's something where the people who see it, they go to their inner realms. And so this relationship is very fascinating because it clears up all war. You know what that means? That means the biggest error in the inefficiency that has slowed down our civilization was thinking that our minds we're in this physical room alone. We are creatures that are alive in two dimensions, and you see all the species on this earth, they will also too evolve to a point where they will become conscious of greater ways the self is occurring. You see, it's as if, somebody asked God, it's like, God, why is all this happening to me? And God responded, hey man, it's just all energy, relax. It's energy, man, relax, God created you, relax, bro. And so it's this idea where the conception is reflecting the design of its source. It's how it's put into motion. So the next time you are in an argument with someone, it's as if for a second just pause and be like, is this person aware of their outer realms or are they not? And let me tell you, when you see a person, for example, if you were to explain child psychology, and I'll tell you, I was in Tehran International School, which is a school in Iran, a couple years, and I'm telling you, that school there wasn't bullying. You were just automatically had to be a warrior. Do you know what I mean? It was a violent kind of, and in Iran the schools are segregated, so it was an all guys school kind of. And this school, every kid, check this out. So I was kind of like at the age of 7, I came to Canada, lived here for some time, and then I went back to Iran. My family had to move back to Iran. So for a couple years, I was living there. And in that couple years, there was only one school because I was kind of schooled in English first, then Farsi. So it was the only school that taught in English in Iran, right? And it was Swiss based. So I don't know, somehow some Persian guy had connections with Switzerland and kind of got it there, got the school there. So it was a Swiss kind of IB system school, okay? So all the kids in the school were like Persian kids who had lived, like one kid had lived in Sweden for a couple years, and he had come back to, his parents had come back to Iran. A bunch of kids were from Canada, a bunch of kids were from America, um, different kids. Even like in the school, like one of my classmates was like, his father was the ambassador of Nigeria, and the other classmate, his father was the ambassador of Egypt. You know what I mean? And there was also a Korean kid whose father worked for LG's. So like this was the like, how can I tell you? So anyways, and in that school there was no such thing as bullying. It was like all the kids were so frustrated that it was as if like they got a taste of a better world, and then they came to a civilization that is more ideologically less free and liberating. You know, that means right now governments are going based on ideas that are, for example, called like uh, like religiously important in some countries, or but they're not actually caring for the experience of the person in this roller coaster of life. Anyways, so I'm pretty much telling you, cyberbullying, just the concept of bullying never existed for me. It's like when you see a nature video, there's wild animals out there. So pretty much as a human being, you got to realize you're not born in heaven. you know but you can build paradise on earth. You can see the earth and the heaven. It's all image. It's like this image comes to my mind of the scene from the movie Enemy at the Gates, where the soldiers were given, one of them was given bullets and one of them was given like a gun, and like many of them were just given bullets. And I thought about life, and I realized it's like, you see, this creature is in an empty place. We're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. So purpose has always been created, and what people like is a purpose that is not of their own creation, because then they don't have to be a responsible participant in. If there will come a time, I feel our species will become so conscious that it will, in some sense, be able to completely separate uh, the amount of energy that is going to objective movement and subjective movement, like exactly to the micro level distinguish it. Because I'm even though I speak about the mind as this, the source of the mind as this attributeless presence of a field, but I am telling you, it's our understanding of energy is pretty much like you put a like a couple month old baby, beside the Hadron Collider, and then we're asking the baby questions. What is the Hadron Collider? And the baby's just staring at us. That's our knowledge. It's like there is on one level we have to be patient because like a tree, when you look at a tree, you can't just plant the seed and be like, all right, I'm gonna come back tomorrow for the fruit. Life is filled with stories, really. It's colored by it. We color the moment into meaning through language. And so I feel we are multidimensional, and we freaked out as a creature who saw the emptiness and decided to just make everything singular. You see, I thought about the Tower of Babylon story and how all human beings were united under one language, and they were building this tower to the gods, and the gods made them speak different languages so they couldn't build the tower anymore. And I was thinking that one language that united human beings is not per se. I mean, if when you look at a language, the words point to an image. So, what is that one image that unites us all? And I looked at the ground and I saw it. Earth is physicality, matter, objectivity is a language that connects us all. And the anti-language, like antimatter, to this is the presence of space. And I feel it's as if we are here to be the grandest painting the cosmos ever drew. I remember I have a twin brother, and I consider my twin brother to be the greatest novelist I know, you know, ever, I think. But he had in one of his stories, he had this incredible, and I'm not going to say anything because I haven't asked him if he's comfortable with me sharing his work in these talks, but pretty much he had created a character that was this divine son of truth, and he had to go through a giant incarnation cycle and to go do something on earth. And then it's as if imagine it was it like the character level he had kind of tapped into was the same archetypally as like Odin and Thor, as like the ultimate god and the son of God, God 1.1. you know and that's the thing. And so his character, the son of the god in that universe, it's as if they asked him to be back on 3. They gave him 3 days. He came back in 2, and it was like a billion-year incarnation cycle that this being went through 2 days of this god levelhood. you know the attention that held the lantern in the sky also holds every other concept of meaning. It holds the sky as the sky. You see, so it's like there is some forces of nature holding the sun, gravitation and whatnot, and then you see there are, we can even say, the four major forces, electromagnetism, gravitation, and strong nuclear and weak nuclear, you know. What's interesting is that the scales of consideration change. It's like, sometimes seeing life just happen in a moment is like the universe already speaking. And I think that's why miracles were very profound, because they were moments that probably appeared like a glitch in the belief system, like a glitch in the video game, in the belief simulation. Really, life is, I think it was like when I looked at the concept of desires, I was like, what could I desire when the self changes? That means I desired something yesterday. Then I woke up tomorrow as a person with totally different emotions and sensitivities, and my desire was another thing. And it's like after waking up every day with a different expectation, after some point you'll be like, what is this? What is this? Every day I wake up, with a vision, with an expectation. What is this? And this is what I realized. That's when the inner realm is ready to go into a metamorphosis, into a collective outer realm, into a collective service for the outer realm. So pretty much after you know how in many systems, I think ancient Greece and even Indian thought this applies, but it was like till the age of 25, the child had to be a student. The being had to be a student. And I was thinking, student of what? Student of the differentiation between their inner realms and their outer realms. And if you become conscious of, like what's fascinating about intuition and conscience and the logos is not the content, but where the speech is coming from. It's like imagining a thought so out of this world, then being like, whoa, where did that thought come from? And then suddenly, in that moment of awe is an instantaneous reflection of your own being and what you do. So you see, it's as if God has no choice other than to look at man, because if man wasn't here, what would need a God? So you see, it's as if for me, when I hear the word God or whatever, I just see everything is nature. Before man created language, it's nature. You know, nature is a silent truth, and words seem to animate endless truths. Endless illusions. I feel this idea that all of knowledge is oscillating between the known and the unknown, and there's a static knowledge which appears as images, and there's a dynamic knowledge which appears as a moving process and like a film. I feel that to be aware of how the mind is, uh, believe it or not, filming itself, and that's why memories are generated. It's as if, like, how can I tell you? It's something drives the inner realms first, and once the inner realms are like the engine of a car in winter ready enough, then the outer realms begin moving. And so this is a suggestion that there is an inner life before the outer life. There is a life as space, and there is a life as matter. And the life in as matter which we find ourselves in our conscious waking state, the poet Rumi has this quote where he says there are 10,000 ways to kneel down and kiss the earth. And what he means is there are 10,000 ways of accessing higher dimensions. Or another way of saying it, it's arbitrary. He's saying there are endless ways for evolution to be its own next design. And right now, the conscious waking state is like we have to design. I feel we need designers more than anything. You know, it's like the person starts from the objective realm and he's like, what does matter want? And it comes to a strange nothing, but then the mind